What the hell is going on at Halas Hall? This isn't a coincidence. IT sabotage. First, AGM who triples spending on the offensive line while his draftees are zero Pro Bowls. Are they planning the escape before the collapse? Second, the ghost of a second-round pick is back to haunt UC. Who signed that locker room cancer that even Miami couldn't handle? Third, accusations that expose our internal corruption. Know what's coming. If we don't wake up today, 2026 will be another era of darkness, because this I send tea about Poles or Claypool. It's about a culture that rewards mediocrity. Do you think Detroit, Green Bay, or Minnesota are waiting? They're devouring US. Maximum alert. What we reveal today is the secret manual of failure. If you don't want to stay in the dark, subscribe and hit like. This is our Super Bowl. Look, I think you guys are seeing this all wrong. While the whole city is wondering why Ryan Poles doesn't have his contract extension, I'm telling you this, maybe it's exactly what we need. Do you know what the problem with this organization is? That we've always rewarded mediocrity. After years of watching Ryan Pace sink us with his disastrous decisions, are we now going to give Poles a blank check without showing real results? Let me ask you, how many Pro Bowl players has Poles drafted in 4 years? 0. Do you think that deserves $1 million extension? I think the organization is finally doing things right. Show first, charge later. But here's what really bothers me, and I need you to understand. This team spends $59 million on the offensive line because Poles couldn't develop talent in the draft. $59 million. Do you realize what that means? It means we're buying players instead of developing them, and that's unsustainable. Did you see what happened last year? $17.5 million on the offensive line. Only 4 teams spent less. And what was the result? 68 sacks on Caleb Williams, and we dropped from second place in rushing to 28th. 28th! Is that talent development? Now it turns out that this year we increased the spending to $59 million. We tripled the investment. Why? Because Poles couldn't evaluate the talent he already had. Because he couldn't develop the players already on the roster. And do you know what's the craziest part? That the Bears now spend $146 million on offense. More than Detroit, more than Minnesota, more than Green Bay. Do you realize the madness this represents? We're spending more than teams that have been in playoffs, more than teams with established quarterbacks. What happens when Caleb Williams needs his extension? What happens when we have to pay $50 million per year for a quarterback, and we're still relying on expensive free agents? We'll go into a sports bankruptcy. And here's what really makes me furious. Only 4 teams in the league spend less than us on the quarterback position. 4. We have Williams on his rookie contract, and we're already spending as if we had Patrick Mahomes. What's going to happen in 2027 when we have to pay the quarterback? Where are they going to get the money from? The reality is simple. If Darnell Wright doesn't become Penei Sewell, if Ozzie Trapelo doesn't take a step forward, if Kieran Amagaji doesn't show he can protect the blind side, then Poles failed. And no excuses, because in the NFL you produce or you're out. Did you see what happened with Braxton Jones? The guy injures his ankle, and suddenly we need a plan B. Where's the depth development? Where's long-term planning? I'll say this. The offensive line was supposedly Poles' area of expertise. Aishai's area of expertise. And what do we have? A line that allowed the number 1 draft pick quarterback to be sacked more times than any. Recent rookie. You know what this tells me? That maybe Ben Johnson is right to get more involved in personnel decisions. Because if we let Poles make all the decisions based on his track record, we're going to keep buying expensive players instead of developing talent. And here comes the part that bothers me the most. Only 1 player drafted by Ryan Pace made it to the Pro Bowl. 1. Jalen Johnson. Do you realize what that means? It means this organization has been failing for years in the most important part of a GM's job. But you know what's the craziest part? That Poles has even been creative in trading draft picks. For veteran players, creative. Do you know what that means? That he's admitting he doesn't trust his drafting ability. He's trading picks for players who are already tested because he can't develop talent. The trade for Chase Claypool, 2nd round. The trade for Keenan Allen, 4th round. Do you see the pattern? He trades future picks for immediate solutions. That's not franchise building. That's survival. And do you know what's going to happen? That in 3 years, when we don't have draft picks and have to pay million-dollar contracts, we're going to be exactly where we were with Pace. Buying expensive players, relying on free agents, and praying for some miracle to save us. The reality is this. Until Poles proves he can draft Pro Bowl players, until he proves he can develop young talent, until he proves he can build a franchise without relying on expensive free agents, he doesn't deserve an extension. You want to know why Green Bay dominates the division? Because they develop talent. Why is Detroit in the playoffs? Because their draft picks become star players. Why does Minnesota compete year after year? Because they don't rely completely on free agents. We keep doing the same thing that's failed us for decades. We spend money hoping it buys success. And history tells us it doesn't work that way. And here we have the guy who defines everything wrong with Poles' decisions. Chase Claypool, the receiver who cost us a 2nd-round pick, now says he's ready to return to the NFL after a whole year off. Remember this individual? 18 receptions. In 2 years, 18. 191 yards and 1 touchdown. 1 touchdown. I'll say this. My grandma would have had more receptions. And she's 85 years old. But here's what really gets me. This guy now says he's in the best shape of his life. That he's stronger and faster than ever. Where was that shape when wearing navy and orange? Where was that dedication when Matt Eberflus had to tell him to stay home? Do you remember everything that happened with this guy? Because I don't. Forget anything. He came from Pittsburgh with a questionable reputation. The Steelers traded him for a reason. And what did Poles do? He traded a 2nd-round pick for him. Do you know what a 2nd-round pick represents? It's the future of the franchise. It's a player who can be with you for 5 years with a controlled contract. It's talent development. And what did we get? A guy who lasted less than 2 years and caused more headaches than solutions. Did you see what happened in Detroit? The sideline tantrum. The guy was more concerned with his personal stats than the team. Is that what we want in our locker room? Is that worth a 2nd-round pick? And the fights in practice. He fought with Eddie Jackson, with Tyreek Stevenson. Do you realize what that means? That he wasn't just a problem on the field, but also in the locker room. He was dividing the team. But you know what's the craziest part? That after all that, the Bears had to trade him to Miami for another 2nd round. They lost Claypool and got a draft pick. Do you realize it was basically a second-for-second swap with 2 years of headache in between? And what did he do in Miami? 4 receptions. 4 in 9 games. Is that the talent that was supposedly suppressed? Is that the receiver who was going to change our offense? But here's what bothers me. Buffalo signed him last year. Buffalo, the team that turns trash into gold. The team that has Josh Allen, who can make any receiver look good. And what happened? They waived him in August? Do you realize what that means? That not even Buffalo, with all its offensive magic, could do anything with this guy. Sean McDermott, who's a genius at developing players, couldn't rescue him. And now it turns out he spent all of 2024 rehabilitating a toe injury. A toe injury. A toe injury kept him out all season. Can you believe this? Do you know how many players play with more serious injuries? How many players break their fingers and keep playing? But this guy needed a whole year to rehab a toe injury? And now he says he's ready to come back. That he's in the best shape of his life? Let me ask you, do you believe him? After everything that happened, after all the trouble he caused, after all the opportunities he wasted? But you know what's craziest? This guy once said he was one of the top 3 receivers in the NFL. One of the top three. Do you know any top three receiver looking for work after a year out of the league? Did DeAndre Hopkins look for a job? Devontae Adams? Tyreek Hill? Cooper Kupp? Stefon Diggs? Did any of these guys spend a full year out of the league? Of course not. Because elite receivers don't go jobless. You want to know the truth. Claypool represents everything wrong with our personnel decisions. We spend valuable resources on problem players instead of developing young talent. We trade draft picks for quick fixes that don't work. And you know what's most frustrating? That with that second-round pick we traded for Claypool, Pittsburgh selected Joey Porter Jr. Do you know who Joey Porter Jr. is? A cornerback already starting and has a star future. Meanwhile, what do we have? Bitter memories of a receiver who caused more headaches than solutions. That's the difference between teams that build well and teams like us, Doc. But here's what really makes me furious. This guy now goes around saying his talent was suppressed. Suppress? What talent? The talent of disappearing in crucial moments. The talent of causing trouble in the locker room? Do you think any team will give him a chance after all this? I'll tell you that if I were a general manager, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. The guy is radioactive. He's a distraction waiting to happen. And you know what's saddest? That probably some desperate team will give him a shot. And they'll learn the hard way what we already know, that Claypool is more trouble than he's worth. But here's what's really going to ignite the city. Chase Claypool just accused the Chicago Bears of suppressing his talent during his time here. Suppressing his talent. Can you believe the audacity of this guy? This guy had the nerve to write on social media that his talent was suppressed in the last 2 years. Do you know what that means? He's blaming Chicago and Miami for his failures. He's saying it wasn't his fault. I'll say this. What talent, Chase? The talent of throwing. Tantrums on the sideline? The talent of fighting with your own teammates in practice? The talent of disappearing in crucial moments? The talent of being sent home because your work ethic was questionable? Do you remember when this guy fought with Eddie Jackson and Tyreek Stevenson in practices? Remember when he had to be sent home because his work ethic was questionable? Remember the tantrum in Detroit when the ball wasn't coming his way? That's the talent that was suppressed. But here's what's craziest. This guy dares to say the pieces will align, and he'll be able to show what was suppressed. The pieces will align. Which pieces? The pieces that didn't align in Pittsburgh? The pieces that didn't align in Chicago? The pieces that didn't align in Miami? The pieces that didn't align in Buffalo? How many teams will you blame, Chase? How many organizations will you accuse of suppressing your talent before realizing maybe, just maybe, you're the problem? Do you understand what this represents? This guy's been through 4 teams in 3 years. 4 teams! Pittsburgh traded him. Chicago traded him. Miami let him go. Buffalo waived him. But according to him, everyone suppressed his talent? You know what's most insulting? This guy says he was playing his best football in Buffalo. His best football. Do you know how long that best lasted? 2 weeks of training camp. Is that playing your best football? And now it turns out Josh Allen and Sean McDermott supported him. Of course they supported him. Do you think a coach will publicly destroy a player? Do you think Josh Allen will throw a teammate under the bus? That's professionalism, not a validation of your talent. But here's what really gets me. This. Guy says he went from being 14th in depth to taking reps with the first team. 14th. Do you realize what that means? He arrived in Buffalo as the 14th receiver in depth. Do you know what that tells me? Buffalo signed him as a low-risk gamble. They put him at the end of depth to see if he could do something. And what happened? He got injured before proving anything. And now it turns out that injury was like a joke. From God? A joke from God. Can you believe the victimization? The lack of personal responsibility? The incapacity to accept that maybe you're not as good as you think. But you know what's craziest? This guy once said he was one of the top 3 receivers in the NFL. One of the top 3. Do you know any top 3 receivers who have been through 4 teams in 3 years? Any top 3 receiver who's out of the league for a full year? Did Devontae Adams go through 4 teams? Tyreek Hill? Cooper Kupp? DeAndre Hopkins? Stefon Diggs? Of course not. Because elite receivers don't go jobless. Elite receivers aren't traded. Elite receivers aren't waived. You want to know the truth about suppressed talent? Here's the truth. Chicago gave him opportunities. Matt Eberflus gave him opportunities. Luke Getsy gave him opportunities. And what did he do with those opportunities? Wasted them. Do you know how many targets he had in Chicago? How many times did Justin Fields throw the ball to him? How many routes did he run? How many opportunities did he have to show that supposed talent? Dozens. And what did he do with them? Nothing. But here's what really makes me furious. This guy is insulting the entire organization. He's saying the coaches didn't know how to use him. He's saying the system wasn't suitable for him. He's saying the quarterbacks didn't give him opportunities. Do you realize what that means? He's blaming Matt Eberflus, Luke Getsy, Justin Fields, the coordinators, the receiver coaches, everyone but himself. That's a loser's mentality. And you know what's most insulting? He's putting Chicago in the same category as Miami. Chicago and Miami. Do you realize Miami let him go too? That Tua Tagovailoa, who turns any receiver productive, couldn't do anything with him. But here comes the part that bothers me most. This guy says he deeply believes the pieces will align. Deeply believes. Based on what? His history of failures? His inability to keep a job? His reputation of being a locker room problem? Do you think any team will read these statements and think, wow, this is exactly the kind of player we need? A guy who's blaming everyone else but himself. A guy who says his talent was suppressed instead of accepting maybe he's not as good as he thinks. But you know what's craziest? That probably some desperate team will give him a chance. And when he fails again, he'll blame that team too. He'll say they suppressed his talent. He'll say they didn't use him correctly. Do you see the pattern? Pittsburgh suppressed his talent. Chicago suppressed his talent. Miami suppressed his talent. Buffalo, injury was a joke from God. What will be the next excuse? The reality is this. Claypool can't accept that he was the problem. It's easier to blame organizations than to look in the mirror and accept maybe, just maybe, you're not as good as you think. And you know what's saddest? That these statements will follow this guy for the rest of his career. No general manager will read this and think, this is a guy who accepts responsibility. They'll think, this is a guy who will blame my organization when things don't work out. Do you think Bill Belichick would want a guy like that? Do you think Andy Reid would tolerate that mentality? Do you think Sean McDermott will give another chance after these statements? Of course not. Because winning coaches don't want players who blame everyone else but themselves. They want players who accept responsibility. They want players who work to improve. They want players who aren't a distraction. And what is Claypool? A walking distraction. A problem waiting to happen. A headache no serious team will want. But here's what really bothers me. These statements will make some Chicago fans doubt. They'll think, maybe we were right. They'll think, maybe we didn't use him correctly. They'll think, maybe we lost talent. No, we didn't lose anything. We got rid of a problem. We got rid of a distraction. We got rid of a guy who was dividing the locker room. You want to know the truth about Chase Claypool? The truth is, we had the chance to see exactly who he was. And what we saw didn't please us. And we were right to let him go. Listen, Chicago fans, after everything we've just analyzed, after all the truth we've just laid on the table, I ask you, do you think Ryan Poles deserves an extension without producing a single Pro Bowl player? Do you think Chase Claypool is right to blame organizations for his failures? And do you really think any team will give him another shot after such irresponsible statements? Because I'll say this, these 3 news items aren't separate. They're not coincidences. They're deeply connected and represent exactly where we are as an organization at this crucial moment in our history. We have a general manager spending more money than winning teams, but still hasn't produced a single Pro Bowl player in 4 drafts. We have a former player who cost us a second-round pick and now has the audacity to blame our organization for his failures. And we have a franchise at a tipping point where the next decisions will determine if we continue in mediocrity or finally make the leap. Do you realize we're spending more on offense than Green Bay, Detroit, and Minnesota? Do you realize we're spending $59 million on the offensive line because we couldn't develop talent? Do you realize that when Caleb Williams needs his extension, we'll be in serious financial trouble? And meanwhile, what do we have? A former player who lasted less than 2 years with us, saying we suppressed his talent. His talent. What talent? The talent of making 18 receptions in 2 years? The talent of fighting with his teammates? The talent of being sent home for work ethic issues? Do you know what this tells me? That we still haven't learned to evaluate character. That we're still trading draft picks for problems. That we're still buying players instead of developing talent. And you know what's most frustrating? Claypool will go around telling his side of the story. He'll say Chicago didn't know how to use him. He'll say Matt Eberflus didn't have a plan for him. He'll say Justin Fields didn't give him opportunities. And some fans will start to doubt. They'll think, maybe we were right. They'll think, maybe we lost talent. No, we didn't lose anything. We got rid of a problem. Do you want to know why Green Bay dominates the division year after year? Because they don't make these mistakes. Because they don't trade draft picks for problem players. Because they develop young talent. Because they have a winning culture that doesn't tolerate distractions. Why is Detroit in the playoffs? Because Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes built culture where personal responsibility comes first. Where if you don't produce, you're out. Where there's no room for excuses. And what are we doing? We keep making the same mistakes. We keep trading the future for the present. We keep spending money, hoping it buys success. But here's what you really need to understand. This isn't just about Chase Claypool. It isn't just about Ryan Poles. It's about the culture of this organization. It's about if we're finally going to learn from our mistakes or keep repeating the same patterns. Do you think Ben Johnson will tolerate players like Claypool? Do you think he'll allow a receiver to divide the locker room? Do you think he'll give opportunities to players who don't accept responsibility? Of course not. Because Johnson comes from Detroit, where the culture is hard work, personal responsibility, and team first. Where if you don't fit in, you're gone. And that's exactly what we need here. A culture where excuses aren't accepted. Where individual talent isn't more important than the team. Where personal responsibility comes first. But to build that culture, we need to make the right decisions. We need to evaluate character along with talent. We need to develop young players instead of relying on expensive free agents. We need to build for the future, not the immediate present. And that's why Poles' extension is so important. Because we need to know that our general manager understands this. We need to know he can draft players who not only have talent, but also character. We need to know he can build a winning culture. So far, what have we seen? We've seen creativity. In trades, we've seen massive free agent spending. We've seen attempts at quick fixes. But have we seen the development of young talent? Have we seen drafted players reaching the Pro Bowl? Have we seen a winning culture? The answer is no. And that's why I think the organization is smart not to rush the extension. Because we need to see more.